So before we start the discussion, just in order to kind of try and keep it organized, we are looking for comments, suggestions, ideas, and questions. We actually have some questions we received ahead of time that we will try to respond to, which helps us get to the point that we may not have all of the answers, but we can take them back to the library and they will be useful to us in the conversations the subcommittees are having. If you want to comment, please raise your virtual hand. If you click on the participants button in the menu, it'll show you a raise hand. I think ours is not a little raised hand icon. It's a little box or a little oval that says raise hand. Raise your hand. It'll put you up in order, and I will call on you. I don't know that we'll be able to get to everybody. It depends on how many questions there are. So our addresses are here. They're pretty easy. If you type in Harriet, you pretty much get me. And then Richard Preiss. Please feel free to email us with questions. We'll respond. We will put them into the pot of discussion. And so with that, I think we are ready to start the discussion, and I'm going to stop sharing. I will ask that if you have a question, if your video is off and you feel comfortable turning your video on, we would love to see your face while you're asking the question to kind of remember who you are, but it is not required. And I see Kathleen Degree has the first question.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say this is an amazing task force, and I totally understand the challenges. I'm on 2 publications committees for 2 societies, and have been doing this for many, many years. And every year I advocate for non-raising the prices to the libraries because I knew it was not sustainable. But here's, and I go to the library website, the Eccles Library website, every day. There hasn't been a day since, the days of Index Medicast when I used to trudge over to the library and do that. But now I'm at the library every single day. So it is critical to my work, to my teaching, et cetera. And I know you guys realize that as well. And it's probably the best, the Eccles Library and Marriott libraries are probably some of the best libraries in the whole country. I mean, because they are innovative, they're creative, they do things that like self-publishing. We've got 2 journals now that we're self-publishing. I mean, cool that there are many of these journals that are coming out of the library that we're self-publishing. And I think this kind of trend is really important because it gives an outlet where we have some control. We who do the research, we don't want to have to pay to get our research back. I just wanted to get one of my books. I had to go to Amazon and pay way too much money. My book that I wrote and sweat over from years ago, it just drives me crazy. Anyway, I have several things I want to bring up. First, I'm sure you've looked at Iliad use, asking about interlibrary loans and whether we could rely on interlibrary loans. It means that we wouldn't get things like that day maybe, but maybe the next day. Second, I'm sure you've looked at what's going on in California because they have basically canceled all their subscriptions. And I don't know if they've got, and we should have a cohort that we could contact, like Carrie Byington, who's the head of the UC system, to try to get some information about how they're dealing with it. But I'm sure they've already come across some challenges that we could learn from them. And I'm sure we've also thought of ourselves as part of the Pac-12 and that whole group then, and I'm sure all those libraries are dealing with the same thing. And then finally, I just wanted to say, if you want student input, you could ask all of us to get students to come to one of these. I mean, I didn't realize that student input was something that you really, really wanted. And if you want more, we could get medical student and residents and fellows, et cetera, to come. I had no idea that was something that was really important to you. I probably will have more, but that's my beginning.
So I think I can answer questions. So interlibrary loan is a really valuable thing. Our average number of downloads a year is 11 million. If you think about purchasing them, that's, 40 million, about $40 a shot for medical papers. You can get them through interlibrary loan. Interestingly enough, when California, a year and a half ago, announced that the UC system announced that they were cutting ties with Elsevier, the next day they sent out an email to all of the library heads across the country saying, hey, can you put us on the top of your interlibrary loan list? So that was clearly one of their planned responses. The thing about interlibrary loan is it is not free. So we have to have staff managing interlibrary loan, and it costs us money for every transaction. If you think about 11 million transactions, not all of them obviously have to be have to go through interlibrary loan, because some of them are for open access articles or open access journals, and some of them are for journals that people already have a subscription to. They're just going through the library because it's more convenient. But if you think about the sheer volume of going to all interlibrary loan, we would have to add a number of staff to be able to manage those requests, particularly to keep them to a relatively short time to get them. My experience is I usually get them the same day or within a day or two, but it's clearly not the same thing. So interlibrary loan is a partial assistance to this problem, but it does not solve the problem. What about California? The librarians, the library directors and deans for all of these libraries are in very close contact, and we got access to a survey they did of their faculty, staff, and students. And their take home from it was that, the vast majority were very happy that they had taken this move. What Richard and I saw in the survey was that 78% reported a moderate to severe impact on their ability to get the resources they need from journals. So I think the answer is, and that is given that it's really only the most recent articles that are being affected. So I think the answer is, if we decided to just cut ties with Elsevier, there would be a big impact, even at a place like the University of California, which is a huge system. Affiliation or coalitions with other institutions. So we're part of the Utah Library Coalition, Utah Academic Library Coalition. Not a very powerful group in terms of, compared to, say, California. And we are kind of the big library there. And so how do we make it so that we're not just carrying water for everyone? But they are definitely looking at that. Pactel would be a great idea for a coalition, but you've got the University of California libraries that are kind of their own coalition. You've got big systems like in Texas and Florida that they're doing their own negotiating. There is a Western Libraries Coalition, which also potentially has some opportunity. The library is looking into things like building organic collaborations with, like, the Colorado system as a way to kind of get connected to other systems. So we've got some things out there. The other challenge to negotiation as a block is that the publishing companies have a non-disclosure agreement that is part of the contract that says you can't discuss the price with other libraries. So it makes it very hard to collectively bargain when you have that. And that seems to be very difficult to get out of. So we are currently, the committee, that subcommittee is working on what are the options, and, could we kick the can down the road, and then hopefully this will resolve itself. I've been kind of hoping that for 20 years, so I'm not sure that's going to happen. But so those are the answers to those questions. In terms of student input, yes, everybody on this call, please tell students that our last town hall is on Wednesday at 4 p.m. And I will, in a minute, Sean will post the link to registration, so you could share that link to register with them in the comments. So please invite students. I think I got all your questions, Kathleen. Richard, do you have other answers to add?
I just wanted to add one point. There's a lot in there, and we'll probably circle back to some of it, especially about the consortium building. But I wanted to supplement one answer about interlibrary loan. Is that it's important to remember there are problems with scaling interlibrary loan as a kind of catch-all service, both within an institution, because as Harriet was saying, you've got to add staff, it's going to slow down delivery times, but then it also does not, just even logically, theoretically, it does not scale as a system-wide solution, because if everybody jumps ship and everybody cuts ties with the publishers, you're going to end up with like a handful of universities who are carrying the subscriptions of the entire country or the entire, hemisphere. And it can't just be like the University of Nebraska sending out its one copy, for everybody. So this is a sort of, it's like a game theory problem of like, do you want to be one of the, if the way the trend breaks is that everybody defects, that everybody leaves, you want to be one of the early ones who does it so that you can at least enjoy the benefits of other people still maintaining subscriptions. But ultimately, if everyone does, I mean, the hope is that it just forces a systemic reorganization of the whole industry, and just timing it when you jump ship from the system is the key thing. If that's what we decide is the only option, which we're not really committed to doing either. That's all I want to say about it.
Okay, fantastic. So Rachel Jones is next.
Yeah, I have more of a comment. I work up in Research Park, and it's really isolating to be up there. And one of the great pleasures I get is the chance to go and work at the Marriott Library for the afternoon, because when you go there, it feels exciting. There's a lot of students there, the place is crowded, there are quiet places, there are busy places. And I understand, that they perform a lot of functions for different entities on campus, but I would hate to see some sort of reorganization kind of lose the energy and sense of community that I feel when I'm at the Marriott Library.
And I think that's a fabulous point. Obviously, not so much collecting there currently, but this is something that's been highlighted and that the library really takes seriously, is making spaces. And one of the things I did not know about is that there's a family reading room where you can go. Richard knows that much more well than I do, now being an empty nester. But so the library is very focused on how to provide community spaces, and I think that will clearly continue. Again, one of the points of this task force is how do we make sure that the serials crisis doesn't undermine our ability to provide the resources that are really needed.
And to keep anticipating. I mean, one of the things the library seems to be the best at is recognizing when an underserviced need exists, and then addressing it. Because, it's not as if they took petitions from people saying, please make a family reading room, or please make a graduate writing center in addition to the undergraduate writing one. Their staff are close to the ground, and they work with patrons, and they hear the same kind of complaints enough, and it's just a very well-oiled machine that they're able to process those complaints and turn them into action. And again, to the library's credit, the way they restructured the library after the renovation that started in 2005 was to essentially make most of the interior of the library into a kind of malleable proto space that can evolve to address different needs and then revert back to other ones. It's not like in the libraries that most of us grew up working in as students, a space that's just dominated by the stacks, and otherwise it's just a vestibule and you're going in and out. I think it will, no matter what, it will continue to act as a hub for the social and intellectual life on campus. Yeah, but that's a very important concern that we keep coming back to as well. Thank you.
Okay, Martin Kuma.
Hi, I posted a question earlier to you guys that I would like to get to as well, because I think it's pretty important, but a few comments on what the other people said so far. The first thing I'm thinking about, I'm coming from research computing part of the university. And we have been working with communities across the country in accessing resources through federated accounts. And so I'm kind of wondering if there wouldn't be a possibility to access the library resources through federated accounts as well. And that way, you would basically do what Interlibrary Loan does for you without the extra staff that you need to have to support that. Yeah, so we, for example, have set up federation with the University of Colorado, and so we can access their supercomputing systems relatively easily. there are file sharing setups like that. There is one called Globus that we're working pretty closely with, which allows you to federate pretty much anything. Yeah, so I think this would be definitely worth looking at. The other thing with the shared spaces and kind of like repurposing library space for other purposes than storing books. That's a great idea, but I'm kind of thinking about, all the colleges have their meeting rooms and sort of, open spaces. So how much of a duplication of effort we want to do here with the funding, having it funded by the library when the colleges are providing similar things as well. So, I mean, honestly, I was not, that familiar with the budgets challenges that the libraries have with the subscription, although it's kind of comes without saying, really, it's logical the way how the world evolves. So that's definitely probably a bigger challenge for you than what I'm after, which is the collaboration between research computing and research data management, which, at our place is, at you is research computing is sort of a siloed organization under UIT, and the research data management is siloed organization under the libraries, and we don't really talk to each other. And I see a lot of examples of universities across the country where they at least have some kind of a liaisons, or worse situation. In a better situation, they are kind of embedded. Yeah? And that seems like it's working really well for those organizations in which the researchers, and I'm really not really talking too much about undergraduates, I guess more about graduate students and the research faculty. They have sort of a one-stop shop for all their research and publication needs. And I'm not doing that efforts over here. So that's kind of what I would like to ask and see if you kind of keep this in mind, and if you have any plans for the future to, let's say, have closer ties between the libraries and the research computing.
So Martin, I will say thank you. And Dan Reed does have this informatics group that's been pulled together that's really looking at exactly those questions about IT and computer science and how do you integrate them. So I would say stay tuned on that. I think that is coming. There's also a data science center that just started. So I hope that is something that will happen. And it's a really important comment that we will take back and incorporate into the report. In terms of shared spaces, one of the things that we've found through these town halls and in our task force is that everybody at this institution experiences the library in a different way. And so, for example, Richard has all the library books on his shelf behind him and uses actual books from the library. If you need to access special collections, use old books, actually have the actual copy of the book, it becomes really important. For me, I hardly ever go to the library because I can do it all online. So use of the library is very different. I will say, I think students in particular find the spaces in the library useful. Faculty and staff also do, but students don't necessarily feel like they have a home in a specific college, particularly in the first couple of years. And also it gives them direct access to library staff. And I'm seeing a ton of comments about how valuable the staff are. So I think being in the libraries with the staff can be helpful to you, is helpful. I do think that the pandemic will have a positive benefit, which is, hey, there's a lot of ways that we can do things virtually. So Richard, I don't know if you have any comments on either of those points.
No, I think you've spoken to it better than I can, and we're starting to accumulate a good mass of questions. I won't take up any more time. We should get to the next one.
And I think Sean is going to capture these comments get captured in the recording. So thank you for continuing to add comments, which I will read in more detail later, and are great. I think our next one is Shauna Kim Loeyball.
Hi, yeah, that's me. Thank you for this really informative and very alarming presentation. I have sort of two slightly disparate comments. The first is that I use a small number of journals intensively, and the two that I use most, I personally have subscriptions to. I don't know how other fields work, but that is, in fact, reduplicating efforts, but it is easier for me. And it also, for me, it's a scholarly community, so I'd actually read those journals as they come out. I know that that's not how every field is structured. So I wonder, in part, if, I don't know how much we spend on journal subscriptions, but if you divide it by a huge faculty, if you give everybody $400, and the rest comes out of your research account, what does that do? I mean, I have no idea, but I do know that for some of us in some fields, we're already, I know many of my colleagues get journals at the same time I do into their boxes. So that's one thought. The second thought is that I was very alarmed to see that we're no longer buying books except by request. For me, that is a horrible tragedy, and it is also a problem that I did not know that. So, how do I know what the newest monographs are that I will be expected to have read in books or journal articles that are peer-reviewed? To some extent, I read book reviews or other things, but mostly I assume we are a research library. And for my field, that means I go to the library website, look for things, and I need to know, if we're no longer building our collections, that we are not functionally a research library in my field. That's the sort of upshot of that. And start searching at the Library of Congress and then go request all the books that I need us to have. I'm not going to go read the back catalogs of every university press that publishes in my field. And if we do this forever, for 10 years of back catalogs from Cambridge University Press and Yale University Press and all the rest. So it does feel to me like the cost of some of these journals, it sounds like everybody already acknowledges this, but is making us considerably less of a research library in perhaps many other fields.
So
yeah.
Yes, so Shauna Kim, absolutely. And I know Richard has great feelings about this. Yes, it's a problem. And one of the things that we need to look at is how can we make sure we don't interrupt buying of books? How can we solve the serials crisis so that we can do lots of things? One of the reasons we're sending out the survey is the first thing you raised, which is there are lots of things that people have access to through subscriptions. When you think about all the different uses of the library, if you look at students, they tend not to have subscriptions. They may be able to get it through a professor, but one of the modes in which they use the library is their professor says you have to have 4 references for this paper. And they don't really think about specific journal, right? They just go in and they do a search. They might even do a Google search, not a PubMed search or whatever search. And so they won't necessarily get the ones they have subscriptions to. But we're asking in the survey, how are you getting the, do you have access to some of these journals outside of the library? And I think that's a very important question. And it is also very true that it will not solve the problem for everybody. And one of the things that we're trying to hold very close to is there are some journals that have a very small readership, but it's very important to the people who are using it. And so we want to make sure we're not inequitably reducing access to the library. So I think both great points. Yes, we need to keep having books.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in and say, can I just ask, Shauna Kim, what field are you in?
I'm in history and Asian studies, an intersection of the two, and I work in both.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
both very much monograph fields where not knowing that a book has come out is if you're going to write on the subject, is a real problem. Right,
and this again speaks to some of the disciplinary differences here. I mean, in the humanities, we're a much more monograph-driven set of disciplines, and not only that, but journal articles often represent like the first draft or the first cut of an argument, and then you'll get it in its most ambitious and finalized form only in the book. The book is sort of the thing to cite. So in that sense, the monograph is kind of the most up-to-date research for us. And I'm very sympathetic to the problems of having to be your own field librarian and having to keep abreast of what, I guess, using the journal that you subscribe to read the reviews and be like, okay, so these books are out. But the problem is, by the time those books are reviewed, they're 3 years old often. Yeah. So it's very hard to stay up on what new titles have appeared unless you are making this a part of your job. And it's sort of not fair to offload this onto faculty members. Yeah, and the other issue I really like the suggestion of finding a way to subsidize journal subscriptions through faculty research accounts. I mean, there are a lot of professions where membership in a professional organization gets you the subscription to the flagship journal in the field, but research account, the sizes of research accounts vary from department to department. That money is needed for conference travel back when there was conference travel. May there be so again, who knows? But I think that if we end up having to suspend journal subscriptions, which again is like the worst case scenario, we're going to have to piece together access to current journals through some kind of patchwork system that will involve ILL, that will involve individual faculty members, that will involve some kind of sharing between fellow academics at different institutions on a really informal, ad hoc, improvised basis. None of that is great because it's so unsystematic. But yeah, I appreciate all your concerns, and we're taking them all on board. Thank you.
And thank you all for your many questions. We've got a lot of people with questions, but I note that we are at the end of time. So I'm going to ask that if you didn't get a chance to talk, if you could share it. I just put my email in, and I'm putting Richard's in the thing. Chat.
And I'm happy to stay also if I don't have. And
I unfortunately have another commitment now, but so I can't. So Richard's going to stay, and for as long as people want to keep talking. But please send us your questions, and I will also say that we have the questions that were submitted that we didn't quite get to. Although I think the answer to many of them is yes, we are planning to keep all the things that are currently offered as far as possible. There may be some that get winnowed, but so there were some questions about, is there still going to be literature review training and article retrieval? Yes. Will the guide to foundations and grants, et cetera, be kept? Yes. Those seem like very key functions. So there may be some changes to the library, but I don't think that they're viewed as gigantic. I think the key is sort of, are there ways to make it more efficient? Are there some things the library shouldn't be doing, should be doing other things? And are the way, are there ways to get more funding? And primarily, can we fix the serials problem so that there is more funding for other things? And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Richard, and thank you all very much for being here. And
I'll talk to you later, Harriet.
I have to go.
That's okay. It looks like there's still plenty of you guys, and thanks for sticking around, those of you who wanted to ask questions. I can't promise that I'll have a substantive answer, but I'll try. So let's see, is anyone raising their hand? Why don't you just go ahead and unmute yourself? Julie.
Yeah. So I'm one of the students that was here.
Oh, great.
Student in history. So a few things with the town halls, I'm curious if it's possible to do them more in the spring as well, because knowing that we're in finals week, obviously, and even being here, I'm like, I really should be writing a paper right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, so just knowing that Wednesday students will be in finals. So just a thought with that. But I recognize you did these in November too. So one thing is, I just want to echo, I think it was Rachel Jones that mentioned the value in the centralization of the library as like a study space for, and here I'm thinking about students and not necessarily my role as a PhD student or as like an instructor for some survey courses. But I think it's really valuable that the library has adapted to opening up more study space for students, the way that like they've put in compact shelving to make more room. And I think that's a really, really valuable asset, recognizing that that's what students like to use the library for primarily, because you know, like everything they need is there. There's food, there's snacks, there's the technology that they need to check out, and that's really valuable. So building off of that, I'm thinking about some spaces that the library has that is housing in the physical library that don't seem to necessarily benefit the entire university community. And I'm trying to like say this really gingerly, but knowing that things like 3D printing might benefit very specific disciplines in very like narrow ways. So think about is the library the best place to house those? Whereas it might be more beneficial if a college or a university, like a specific department houses those, and those get shifted so that maybe they're still available to everybody, but that the library should maybe benefit everybody, or like have the potential to benefit everybody, rather than just dedicating a massive amount of space to what ultimately only benefits a few departments and colleges. And then this is completely not the direction you guys are wanting to go in with considering the budget cuts. But I just wanted to give a plug for staff pay, because I know this is like, this will only compound your problems, but just giving a plug for the inequity in staff pay for the library. And I don't work for the library, but just knowing that our library, unfortunately, it does not keep track with nationwide library worker standards. So just putting that out there, total opposite. And I don't envy your work with the serials, because that sounds absolutely terrible. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Those are all, those are quite a few really good points, and I want to sort of address each of them if I can. Yes, dealing with the serials thing sucks. And I mean, it's going to suck for all of us if we can't come up with some more, moderate compromise solution or a longer term solution. However, we're also, as I mentioned, trying to come up with different budget models for the library, some of which have the potential of, increasing the overall library budget, even independently of what we do about serials. There are ways to probably increase the library budget more proportional to the value that it contributes to research on campus. In fact, it sort of directly ties it to its centrality as an engine for research on campus, and that would bring the library budget in line with other Pac-12 and AAU research institutions. I mean, we rank quite low on the list of how proportional our library budget, how just the absolute size of the library budget, and then in proportion to the amount of research funding that the campus receives. Those are remediable things. So we hope that we're able to address staff inequities in staffing pay. And I hear what you're saying about, I mean, this goes directly to the point about the value that the librarians contribute. In the same way that the old-fashioned model of the library was, the library is built to house collections, mainly books, and then people just kind of peep about and find their way. The library has really shifted its paradigm over the last 20 years or so to being a much more user-centered space. And that includes not neglecting the size of the library staff, because most often it is the librarian who connects the user with the collections. I mean, otherwise they don't find each other naturally. Now, to things like 3D printing, I went in likewise a little skeptical. I mean, I'm a humanist. I don't personally see a lot of use in my daily life for 3D printing. And I have the sense that this has been sort of a hot button issue for some other critics as well. But from the data that we're gathering within the library, it actually seems like, first of all, not a really big ticket item, not as much, it doesn't cost as much as you would think. And it does actually get used, apparently by students who are not in engineering or business, or I'm trying to think of another discipline that would use it, maybe CS or something. But I mean, it does seem actually to be fulfilling the purpose that it was designed for, which is to give access to this technology to students who want to fabricate something, who don't already have a natural, departmental home to go find that equipment. And more importantly, again, to have somebody to show them how to use it. Because, if you put me in front of a 3D printer, I would just like hit print, or I would not know what to do with it. So it seems like a relatively successful experiment, but this, I think, is a really critical point. We want to make sure that there are, in the same way that the library seems to be really good at recognizing where a need is and fulfilling it by providing the resources for it, there needs to be a kind of mechanism for identifying what's a successful experiment and what's an experiment that maybe needs to be retired, sunsetted, or moved over to another entity on campus. I mean, the library is a great place for starting these kinds of projects, but then the question is, where do they go? And I think that's what we're trying to figure out, like a clear roadmap for that process. But that was a very long answer, and I'm not sure any of it was an answer, but thank you, Julie. Those were great questions.
Hey, Richard, this is Sean. I need to run to another meeting, and so since it's live Zoom and I'm recording, I unfortunately need to end the session. So I apologize.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Who we haven't gotten to.
If anybody has any questions, if you had any questions in the pre-submitted questions for this that were not directly addressed, put in the chat right now who you are and what it was, and then we'll get the answer back to you. And if you have any other questions, just email me or email Harriet, and we'll be happy to respond to whatever extent we can. Sorry that we ran out of time, but thanks for attending, everybody.